Before World War II, the status of women was limited to the home, which is much lower than the role of men. Most of the women's job was taking care of their home and their kids. They were not allowed to go out and work and make money like a man. However, when the US entered the war, more than 6 million women started working to help support the war, because many men were enlisting in the military. In this documentary, I interviewed Nanny Rosemary, who was familiar with the changing role of women in World War II.
I would like to talk about the changing roles of women in the last 75 years. I was born in 1940 when the roles of women were pretty much defined, that you were a wife and a mother, and barring that, you became a nun, or you worked for the telephone company, or were a school teacher, but not much more than that. There were a few women, of course, who always stood out, but they were few and far between. From 1940 till the war years were over in 1945, women's lives got turned upside down because as the men left to fight in the war, women took their places in every possible thing that could be done. They were cab drivers, bus drivers, garbage collectors. They worked in the factories, they built the airplanes, they managed airplane building. They rose in many places to be the managers of their department. And obviously, since the United States outproduced any other nation for war supplies, they must have done a wonderful job, and they did. When the war was over, come around when the men came home, all the women got fired, and they had to go back home into their kitchens again. But most didn't mind it at first, after they got over the shock of not being useful anymore, they thought. Because the men who came home wanted to start families, and they did. By the end of the 50s, you see a big improvement in women being able to have other jobs. Not big. I mean, it is a big improvement, but it wouldn't be big by 2015 standards. By the end of the 60s, women, that's 40 years now from when I was born, there were big changes.
In 1940s, the percentage of the women working at the factory is 25%, but after the war, through the 1950s, the waves shifted to a really low percentage because most of the men came home from the war and take their jobs back from the women. And more women got married and stayed home with their families, directly resulting in the baby boom, which means there was an increase of the percentage of the born of babies. In 1960s, 2 of 5 women were in working and 30% were married. In 1962, the wife of a former President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, approached the President John F. Kennedy to make the change of the education for women. In the Presidential Commission report, the percentage of the earning of the working woman ranged from 30% to 60% less than men. The finding shows the discrimination against women. And at the same time, there was a feminist movement that shows the unfairness of the system and we need to change the thinking of the society. In the 1970s through 2002, the changes occurred in both types of job and the wages they're going to earn. Between 1972 and 2002, the jobs of managers doubled, and the wages rose 63%. This big factors that making this possible is going to the college and get education for a better job.
Because my family, I had 5 children, and the 4 who are my biological children, they all graduated from college, that boys and girls. So our 5th child was adopted, and he was not as successful. I got him through high school, which was a big thing. And then the girls, and when their children grew up, there was no question of them not going to college, and then to not only go to college, but go to more than just being school teachers or other things other jobs where women were sort of expected to go into. They began to go to medical school. I mean, ordinary people, they went to medical school, they became engineers, whereas today, 2015, the sky is the limit. Women can do what I've been telling people all my life. They can do any job a man can do if they lean towards it. I could never be a doctor because I don't like things like that. But if I wanted to, I certainly could. But the roles that changed from 1940 to 2015, it also put a lot of burdens on women because now they live in a country, the United States, who has terrible daycare. The government does not help women to be better mothers and professionals too. Almost every other industrialized nation has some form of daycare for women, and they have, like, I traveled this summer in Europe, and almost every nation there, Holland, Germany, France, England, they have some kind of child care, and they give women off when they have a baby to stay home for a certain amount of time. They get paid to do that. That makes it easier. And Miss Kira, she comes from China, where it's very easy to have someone to care for their children, but not in the United States. But we've come a long way, baby.